Welcome again, friends, to our next session of understanding fundamentalist Islam from a fundamentalist Christian perspective. Before we get started in today's session, I want to give a quick summary review of the last session. And in the last session, we talked about the commonality of the genealogies between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And basically, with a couple of very minor exceptions, all three religions have the same genealogy up till the time of Ishmael. Another point that we talked about last time, was that both Muslims, Christians, and Jews differ on which son of Abraham actually has the Abrahamic covenant passing through him. The Jews and Christians believe that the blessings or the benefits of the Abrahamic covenant passed through Isaac. The Muslims believe that the benefits of the Abrahamic covenant of God to Abraham passed through Ishmael. The next situation that we wanted, or the next point that I wanted to review, is that when you look at Genesis chapter 21, verses 14 through 21, where the events that talk about Hagar actually looking for the water that the angel tells her, the Muslims postulate that these events happened in the area of Mecca, actually on the grounds where the Grand Mosque or the Great Mosque is currently located. The Christians and Jews basically differ with that, saying that the events that are described in Genesis chapter 21 actually occurred in the desert of Paran. And in the last session, we talked about some of the biblical explanations for that geography. We talked about the relationship, or how close it is to Egypt, how it made a whole lot more sense for Ishmael to have an Egyptian wife, being that close to Egypt, than perhaps having an Egyptian wife in the locality of Mecca. Another situation, and the last point that we talked about at the end of the session, was that Islamic traditions state that Ishmael married a Jurhamite woman. Now, when you look at Genesis chapter 21 and verse 21, it specifically states that Ishmael married an Egyptian. It talks about Hagar actually getting, basically going home and getting a woman of her nationality, which of course would have been Egyptian. Genesis chapter 25 and verse 18 states that Ishmael's descendants, and this is a direct quotation, Ishmael's descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the border of Egypt, as you go toward Asher, and they lived in hostility toward all their brothers. That is Genesis chapter 25 and verse 18. So there is a vast difference in who Ishmael's wife actually was. Was she a Jurhamite woman, or was she Egyptian? When you look at this land that's spoken of in Genesis chapter 25 and verse 18, this land correlates roughly to the land of the Amalekites, which is a nomadic tribe during the time of the Old Testament. So we've talked about some of the commonalities between the three great religions, the belief basically in a monotheistic religion, which is one God, but we're starting to now get into how these religions differ from each other. All right, so what I'd like to do today is I would like to continue to discuss the disputing between Judaism and Christianity as towards Islam. When you look at, and if you take Genesis chapter 25 on its face value, it states that neither Ishmael nor his 12 sons, and his 12 sons are identified in this chapter, neither Ishmael or his 12 sons, or the tribes that descended from these 12 sons, actually lived or settled in Mecca. while it is probably true that over the millennia after Ishmael's death, that some of his descendants eventually migrated or immigrated into this area around Mecca, while that is probably very true, there is no direct link other than Islamic or Muslim tradition, but there is no historical information that backs up or validates the Muslim or Islamic tradition of Ishmael's people living in the area of Mecca. Some Islamic historians have identified one of Ishmael's sons, who is Naboth, as the father of the Nabateans. The Nabateans, and if you're not familiar with them, we're going to be talking about this in a future session when we actually start to look at pre-Islamic history on the Arabian Peninsula. We're going to get into the Nabateans and some of the other kingdoms that predated Islam. But the Nabateans are a very, very important tribe in the northern peninsula. But again, some of the Islamic historians have identified the Nabateans as being the children or the descendants of Ishmael's son Naboth. Just a little bit of a history. The Nabateans flourished at establishing their capital in the city of Petra. And if you're familiar with Petra, it is the city that was carved into living stone, living rock. As a matter of fact, in one of the Indiana Jones stories, I forgot which one off the top of my head what the actual name of the film was, but in one of these stories, they actually enter the city of Petra, and you can see the palaces, the different buildings carved into the side of this valley, into this rock. But Petra was established in about the 4th century before Christ. Petra was eventually captured and brought into the Roman Empire about 106 BC. After the conquest of Petra, eventually the Nabateans began to disperse. Some of them went into the area around Damascus. The Dead Sea Scrolls that were eventually found also contain Nabatean documents from the latter period of the Nabatean reign. Ibn Ishaq, who we talked about in a previous session, he's one of the prominent Muslim historians, asserts, and Ibn Ishaq is one of the historians who holds to and purports the belief of the Muslims, the Arabs, actually descending from Ishmael. And Ishaq states that the Nabateans came from or derived from Naboth, which is simply not true. The Ishmaelite tribes, especially the tribe of Naboth, is the tribe from whom Muhammad is said to have come. So in other words, when you look at Muhammad's lineage, Ibn Ishaq identifies Muhammad as coming from Naboth. And we're going to actually get into, again, in a future session, where we're going to actually talk much more in depth about Muhammad's ancestry. But when you look at the historical record, the tribe, the Nabateans, were nomadic tribes and that lived in the Sinai and the Fertile Crescent deserts. These tribes, and particularly the tribe of Naboth, disappeared from the historical record somewhere around about the 7th century BC. When we continue to go on looking at the Arabs descending from from Ishmael, there are quite a few other problems with this belief. Again, as I said before, even though it may be true that some of Ishmael's descendants settled in the peninsula of Arabia, particularly further south in the area of Mecca, this does not mean that they necessarily were the father of the Arabs. what is really interesting, and again, when we get further into the history of the Arabian Peninsula, the tribes that had a direct influence on the, the, the establishment and the growth and development of Islam actually were more associated with the current country of Yemen. So when you look at the history, you don't see the influence of the northern tribes coming south and into this area around Mecca. Rather, what you see is the local tribes, particularly of a Yemenis historical or descendancy, that being an influence of southern tribes as opposed to northern tribes. But again, Ibn Ishaq, even he himself, in his biography of Muhammad, states that Ishmael is the son of Abraham, who is the son of Terah, who is Azer, the son of Nahor, the son of Serah, the son of Ra'u, the son of Phalik, who is the son of Abar, who is the son of Shalik, who is the son of Akshad, who is the son of Sam or Shem, who is the son of Noah. And this is from the book Ibn Ishaq, The Life of Muhammad, was translated by a gentleman by the name of Guillaume. That is a direct indication. So when you look at the Arabs here, you see this line coming through these descendants directly back to Noah. And then there's another line from Ibn Ishaq where he identifies Ad, born of Os, who is born of Iram, who is born of Sam, who is born of Noah, and Thamud, and Jadis, the two sons of Habar, who is born of Iram, who is born of Sam, again born of Noah, and that Tazim and Imlak and Umayyan are the sons of Lawid, who is the son of Sam, who is the son of Noah, and he identifies those particular people as being Arabs, which is a different lineage. Again, I would encourage you to go to the website houseserenity.publishing.com and actually download the outline. While it may be a little bit more difficult to understand this in talking about it directly, if you download the outline, it might make it a little bit easier for you to understand where this lineage is coming from. When you look, Nabit is born of Ishmael. So Nabit is one of Ishmael's sons, begets Yashub, and the line runs, and Ishmael's line runs on to Rub, Terah, Bahur, Muk Awan, Udad, and Adnan. That is, again, Ibn Ishaq, The Life of Muhammad, again translated by Guillaume. These quotations, these two separate quotes that I've just identified, demonstrated that the Arabs existed long before Ishmael was born, according to this tradition. So when you actually look at this, Ishmael's great uncles were already considered, at least by Ishaq, to be Arabs. So when you look at what even Ibn Ishaq is saying, is that the Arabs, the nationalities, or this particular genetic strain, for lack of a better word, existed prior to Ishmael and prior to Muhammad. All right. The second thing is that the hadiths, and when we talk about hadiths, this is a very important. You look at hadith. This is a very important word to understand whenever you start to look at Islam, because when you look at an understanding or an explanation of Islam, while the Quran, because it is the supposedly the direct revelation from Allah to Muhammad, is supposed to be the direct words of God to man through Muhammad. The Muslim scholars look at the hadiths, which are the words, the sayings, the traditions, And the hadiths take, if not equal, very close to an equal importance in the understanding of the Quran, because the hadiths, again, are the sayings or traditions, the actions of Muhammad, and what is written in the Quran actually winds up being interpreted through these recorded hadiths. So hadiths are very, very important. The study of hadiths is a paramount study in the Islamic tradition. One of the things that many times Christian or secular researchers or studies of Islam don't get correct is they try to do an interpretation of the Quran basically only on the words, the translation of the Quran by itself. However, as I just said, you get a certain amount of understanding through that, but the hadiths by themselves flesh out that understanding or the interpretation or the explanation of what was actually written in the Quran to a much more complete or full understanding. We're going to stop this here for what's available on YouTube. If you are interested, if you would like to see more of this, to see more of the recording, I would encourage you to go to houseypublishing.com, where that you can be able to see the rest of today's session. So at this time, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, we'll see you again next time. Okay.